page. One more YouTube link, a live channel.
Yeah, I'm streaming here. I'm just waiting for YouTube to connect to OBS. Does your stream key ever change, or is it the same every time? Should just be the same.
Hold on.
Oh, there it goes. Never mind.
I'm using Zoom, so
Yeah.
I use Zoom and log into YouTube, so I don't even have a stream. I don't know what it is. I'm sure there is one.
Yeah,
don't get me wrong.
There where it says select stream key. So you don't, I guess, I have one yet.
Yeah. But if we did want to stream to more than one place, that's where, I would need to.
Well, that's really a good way to stream twice is, stream through Zoom, since you can directly connect, and then through your stream key, you probably do. That's easy. Play with it.
Oh, and let me stop sharing. Oh, got it. Okay, stop share. Oh, and then, which I guess I'll do it and record to the cloud, even though, since it's share. This is where you had asked me, like, hey, didn't you share that? I'm like, it gets. I think it's because I booked on my calendar saying I'm going to have a live stream, but I didn't use the YouTube live, Zoom connected to it and created a new one. So I think I got a little confused on things.
All right, I'm going to push go live.
Cool.
There we go. Hello, everybody. It's Tom with Tab Nation here.
I'm Joe, hey, from the Automator.
And I just posted on Reddit too, just saying we're live here in a few minutes. Give everybody a minute or two to see if they join in. I guess I wanted to bring up that thing that you had mentioned about version 1, version 2, and just making sure. Just remind everybody, make sure you're putting version 2 on there, since there's really no way to tell without going through the code and really knowing what you're looking at just yet. But it'll help a lot of people out in the long run, having that first commented out line saying AHK v2 or something simple. It'll make a big difference.
I'm texting Tank to see if he wants to join to discuss the general thing, right?
Oh, that'd be awesome. And where is he out of? He's out of
he's actually a tenant of mine now. He's here in Dallas. It's funny. He moved here, I'd say roughly maybe like 4 years ago, somewhere in there. And I didn't really know him, right? Just from the forum here and there every once in a while. And then somehow we got on a call and he's like, did I tell you I'm moving to Dallas? I'm like, what? And then he moved, and we started talking more frequently, and stuff. And then it just turned out where I'm like, I had a vacancy, and I'm like, dude, he didn't love where he was. And I'm like, why don't you move in? And anyway, it worked out real well.
Very cool. We can talk about all the time.
we get on and chat about a lot of different stuff. Him and I are politically very similar, so we'll talk about that kind of stuff. But we talk a lot of different types of automation. I mean, he's looking in and doing some AI bot chat stuff, as well as other things. And I'm very interested in that as well. So I asked him, hey, why don't you record you doing that? He said he would join in a few minutes. So that's cool.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have someone jump on. Last week was nice. We had someone join. So, if you guys have a mic or a cam, we can always talk. We can connect you to the Zoom thing. That went pretty well. It's nice to, some stuff, can be a lot to type. So talking is always kind of.
Absolutely. Yeah. And getting them to share their screen instead, right? That's the only thing I've run into is, and what this has happened a couple webinars, is people after the fact said, hey, that was actually confidential, and I can't share that, can you go fix it? And thankfully in YouTube, you can go in and obfuscate a current video. You don't have to lose everything, right? But it's still annoying. It's just a pain.
Yeah, I guess that's a good thing if you guys are sharing something, changing the information that you need. If you have your username or password in there for something, just put a fake one in there.
Well, and this is actually a good. And let me think. Oh, hold on. Let me share my. Well, let me see here. I don't share that screen. I want to. Let me share. Save. Okay, now I'm back in studio. Let me find, what was I doing that with?
It's weird to look on my second screen where we're going live and thinking something's wrong because I'm not synced up. And it's like, oh yeah, there's like a 20-second delay.
Right.
So in case you guys message us and it takes us a few minutes, that's why.
Yeah, we're not completely ignoring you. Yeah, I actually have my webcam in front of the chat. So yeah, that'll be, there we go.
We're live, but not like
right.
Technically live. Is that YouTube delay?
Oh, it was with that's what it was. It was with Yelp. Why don't I see? Let me find it before I, just to make sure there's nothing there, because I don't want to have to worry about it. Yelp. What? All right. Well, let me. I'm pretty sure I built it the right way. Well, you know what though?
And what's this for?
I was just going to demonstrate something you said about passwords and this and that, and I want to show my approach, what I do. The other day, I was trying to help a restaurant. Let me see here. You go 3 business search. Let me look at the file first, and I'll share my screen to make sure. Yeah, good. Okay. Close it, and I'll share my screen, and I'll talk through everything here until, like I said, we get someone.
Good. And you said we had one thing we could talk about that someone had asked about hot strings.
We did?
I thought you said something about like the survey.
No, that was from before. I don't think anyone submitted anything new.
Well, since we're talking about it real quick, if you guys have questions and you're not able to see this live, yeah, well, 2 things. The survey, it'll be in the description below once this goes onto the channel, gets uploaded. It'll be a link, and it's just a few questions. And one of the things on there is you can upload a script and, ask us. And it's good for 2 reasons. Is one, it helps us prepare, so we're not just sitting here like trying to figure out what's going on while you're watching. Or, a lot of people are at work, so they're going to be watching this later, but they would like their question to be answered. So that way you can kind of go ahead, ask us, and then watch the video later to see your question being answered. So that'll be in the description below.
Yeah, the other thing in there, we asked a couple other questions about when's best time to have it. Right now, I think for you and I also, and it seemed to be the major time frame was the time we're doing it happened to be a really good time frame. But also, if you want to get alerted to when we're going live, to be notified either email or text. And so if you put in there, we're not using it for anything else other than setting up for spam. No, I'm kidding. So anyway, this, by the way, I've done a lot. I don't know. Have you done videos on APIs, Tom?
I've done like 1, I think. I'm actually working on another one right now, having to do with weather and changing your desktop to match the weather outside.
You can control the weather?
Well, it's a fancy way to see what's going on outside.
I know. It made it sound like you're gonna get it to be the weather. Yeah, I understand.
That would be an API one day.
Right. So, and to be clear, these are web service APIs, right? Because that the first thing, I actually got in this really big argument one time with this guy because he was like talking about X language had an API, and I'm like, in my head, APIs are web service APIs. It's a server we're connecting to. We send a query, and that's what I'm going to show here, at least some of the stuff. And he was talking about like a program API, which do exist. It's just in my head, it wasn't the same thing. And yeah, it was comical now. What's that?
When I hear API, I think that kind of in that order too is, web first. It's
the typical thing nowadays, what most people are familiar with. Anyway, it's just a nebulous term, right? It's a programmatic way to connect to programs. So here you can see these are different API, and some of them are just like the Google one, which I think on our week call last time, I did the cloud, but here under Google, I have these, that I've connected to, and under here I have even other ones. But you can see I've played with a lot of different. How many are here? 89 folders, right? I've played with a lot of APIs. APIs are amazing. Specifically, I'm helping this local restaurant out, and they were trying to find an alternative location. And I thought, hey, you know what? Yelp has information in it, and it has information about whether the business is currently shut down. So maybe I could access the API, get a list of those that are closed, and show them because it has their addresses and everything, right? So let me right click in here. Now they actually hit up since I had done this, because it usually doesn't happen, and you can see maybe some of these have the original date. No, they don't. I went through everything. Oh, here we go. So back in 2017 is when I first started this, right? So it's been a while. When I went to use it, it wasn't working. I'm like, well, what's going on? Well, Yelp completely changed how they do all their stuff, right? But here's my point of what I do. I put, and if we go back here, you'll see it. See this auth.ini file? I put my token and keyword, secrets in here. And that way, when I'm doing this, it's not visible. And it's two things. One is, obviously, I make a lot of videos, and I'm like, oh my God, I got to obfuscate that, blah, blah, blah. Or two, someone says, hey, can I have that script? I can give them this script, and I don't have to worry about having my token or secret passwords or whatnot in there.
Yeah, that's really smart. I didn't think about that for, especially when you're recording and stuff. It's definitely an easy way, especially if you're using an API, you need that information to be real.
Right. Yeah. And of course you could, the alternative, which is you could go back, you could log in usually from a browser and say, hey, change my secret token, and it'll give you a new one. And that way, after your video, I don't even have to obfuscate. I just go change the secret, and hey, it's okay. Okay, we're done. But this just negates the whole, thing. I even wrote, because I have a syntax writer. This is going to launch. These launch different notes right here. Here we go. My API syntax writer. So this, and now if I hold down Control and click, these are like, this would have an example of doing an API call, the WinHP request, the XHR request. But down here, this any read and auth file, it writes code up here that pulls in, I have like 4 or 5 different parameters, and it creates the any file for me. So I don't have to go, because I don't use them very often and I'd forget it. So I just wrote a script that goes and generates those templates for me. And then I just go put in the values, and I'm like, okay, I'm good to go in seconds. Long story short, in case anyone's going to try to do what I was trying to do, what's interesting is Yelp, while it does have that information about whether the property is open or closed, especially closed due to COVID, and it makes sense, right? They didn't state this on their documentation. Every business I found in here was only open. And then it dawned on me, well, they don't want to list anything that's not open, right? That's not what people use their API for. So they're just not making those public. Anyone that's closed gets removed from their data, public data at least. And so I'm like, okay, I can't go the route I was hoping to go to help these people, which was unfortunate. But it does return a actually, I don't remember. I think it was a JSON string. Let me this. Yeah, so this is JSON. And it has information about the business, but it's really cool. You can put in here. I told it, hey, look up, restaurants. Look in this location with the radius. I made a note somewhere in here. That's 40,000 is max, and it's about 25 miles. You can tell how many, and then you can use an incrementation thing to say, give me the first 50, because you can only pull back like 50 at a time, and then get the next 50, the next 50. So you can get some amazing data, and then once you get, because somewhere in here will be that first business's ID. You could then take that ID and go look up even more information about that. About that business. Oh, here it is. This is one business's ID. So I could then hit a different endpoint, and that this is one endpoint here. This is the search one, but then there's different endpoints and stuff. So yeah, they're amazing. They're so fast. They're loads of fun.
Oh yeah, no, it's a lot cleaner than web scraping, just because websites can change a lot of information, and then suddenly, your regex or whatever you're using to cycle the data, it doesn't work anymore.
Well,
The APIs are awesome.
And this was an interesting, again, since no one's here, we can just chat. Yeah. Azaeus or Raptor X and I were working on something, and what endpoint was it? I forget what I was trying to think of the API we were connected to. I don't remember which one it was, but it was returning an enormous JSON string, and I mean like really, really big. And so I in this tool I have, which just search my website for it. If you go to my API page, you'll see it. So response, parse JSON, and here, this parse JSON function, which is in my library, will take this JSON code beneath here, shove it into an AutoHotkey object, and then you can just get exactly what you want, right? So it's a super easy, actually, I could probably even show if I take the data here and just put it here. Now, when I rerun this, it's going to blink first here, and then here we go. So now it's all in an object, right? In an AutoHotkey object, and I can access specifically, easily get what I want. The bad thing is, well, the really interesting thing, and Tom, it blew me away. So I was talking with Isaiah, and he was writing a regular expression on that big script we have, the big JSON string. And he was like, well, this is going to be faster. And I'm like, faster? Well, I know there's time with an object to do stuff, but the object has to iterate over everything, put it into an object, and then access it. And if you are re-accessing it multiple times in different places, this approach might be faster, but his regex was far, far faster than this approach. However, which is what I said was, hey, you know what, that regex though, it might break. This is not going to, what I'm doing here, very, I was going to say not likely. I know that's a word, it's highly unlikely that it will break. But, regex ones, when you take that approach, to me, you're just asking for trouble.
I mean, even something as them changing a single space,
right,
somewhere can just completely break your regex. Regex is awesome because it is fast. It's very cool at getting how it what you can do with it. But yeah, it's so easy to break it from something that's outside your control. And then you're sitting there trying to figure out, okay, how do I fix it? And regex aren't always the funnest to work with.
Well, and that's where I'd say, to be clear also, if you're the one writing it and you really know your stuff, if you really know your stuff, you can add some things to help take into account those things, like you said. Well, what if there's one space now, but there's two spaces next time? There's things you can build to make it a little more robust. But the point is, if you're the one creating, your stuff and it changes, you can probably update it pretty quickly. However, and here was the case, in really working situation, he was writing the regex, yet it was something I was going to be using. And that's where I'm like, well, wait a minute, if it's going to take me a while to edit that with this AutoHotkey object, it's a breeze for me to know what I'm doing. And that's why I'm like, even though the other one's faster, speed, it's not all about speed, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, depending on what you're doing, is a second really worth it when it could break? And then, you're saving a second now when you're using stuff, but what happens down the road when you got to fix it? You kind of lose those seconds that you benefit off of. So you're kind of all over. Hello.
Hey, Tank. So this is Tom. I don't know if you know, Tom has a YouTube channel called Tab Nation, and he's been making videos. And so we did it last week. We're doing it this week of just, hey, let's jump on here and see if people need help. And I was telling him how it was funny how I don't remember. I remember you and we had chatted a couple times, but when suddenly you're like, did I tell you I'm moving to Dallas? I'm like, what? Yeah, that's awesome. Anyway, so last week, Tom and I talked a little bit about the whole V1 and V2 and, should we have some sort of a signal to people commenting it to say what version we're writing for. And when I talked to you about it, because for those you don't know, Tank is the main admin for the AutoHotkey forum, right? Mm-hmm. Which is also a fascinating story. I don't know if Tom's aware even that at one point we branched off to a different forum and then came back. But maybe if we have some dead time, you could tell a little bit of that story because it was really interesting.
Okay. I'm happy to talk about it. It's not, I don't know if it's as dramatic enough for story time, but.
So anyway, with the V1 and V2, that was where, when I talked to you last time, we were discussing how different people have different thoughts, right, on what to do.
Well, I don't want to interrupt the conversation that was occurring before I barged in.
Oh, you're fine. Yeah, I did see.
Also dramatically, like Jesus Christ Superstar.
Oh, nice shirt. I got to go get mine on.
Yeah, I just saw that.
Well, I figured if we were going to do an AutoHotkey thought theme,
you're on me, man. I gotta go do that. I'm
you know, I mean, and I was going to join the guy who got me the shirt,
right,
in a video.
Right.
Maybe I should wear. No, I don't know. Anyway, but no, I don't. It sounded like Tom was making a point whenever I barged in.
We're just kind of chit chatting about some random stuff right now, waiting for people. So,
okay. And actually, hold on one second here, Tank. Just so Richard asked a question about it. What if the server blocks the request due to excessive requests? Can VPNs be blended into the script? I don't know. I hope that second part's a different question. And let me answer now. I don't know if I told you this, Tom. Tank, when it comes to stuff with HTTP protocol and things like that, he's my go-to whiz when it comes to that kind of stuff. You're very knowledgeable, but I would first say it's just, slow down your request, right? Well, Tank, what are your thoughts on? Is it you just need to slow them down because it's on the server, right? So there's no way to avoid that.
So first of all, let's talk about what's going on under the hood. Okay, so for a server to recognize and block something like that, there has to be a web application firewall involved. Web application firewalls are different than a typical firewall in that they examine the data in your traffic as well, to determine or try to determine an intent. So when you get something like a too many requests, it's typically a web application firewall. There's some advanced stateful firewalls as well that can do similar things, but it's typically a web application firewall saying, hey, whatever you're doing doesn't look normal. It may not be malicious, but it certainly doesn't look normal. Now, a VPN is kind of a virtual encrypted tunneled network. It's supposed to make you look like you're on a different node and separate from the general internet. Now, so if you get this sort of response, this too many requests, and you switch to a VPN, you may temporarily see some success because you look like a totally different node from the internet. But the behavior is going to end up triggering the same response at some point, because it is necessarily about the kind of activity that you're partaking in that's triggering the response. So back to your point, Joe, if you don't change the behavior, you're just going to keep seeing the response. You may see some temporary success and think it solved your problem, but it didn't.
And also, if you were even trying to do this, it's that, if you're not using a different token, the security that you're logging in with, you have to change that as well, right? Otherwise, it's a dead giveaway.
I need to get a black cowboy hat and a white cowboy hat for the next part of my statement. Because if you were really trying to be creative here, the thing to do would be to spawn these requests from Kubernetes instances.
What is that?
So these are so you set up a server and you set up these independent modules on the server and that act individually as new servers, right? Mm-hmm. But they're actually just application containers. Okay, they look like a whole new network address and everything. Okay. So you would just roll Kubernetes instances one after another and pipe your results to a common data point. from each instance. So every time a container starts encountering the too many requests, you just kill that container and start up a new one.
That's what I was thinking.
Now I'm not saying that's kind of me slipping on a little bit of, you know, a black hat approach to the subject, but that's you know, then some clever sysops like me is going to examine you on a heat map and notice a common theme with addresses and block a range of addresses. It's going to put a stop to that, but that's besides the point.
Right.
The point is there are a lot of ways around this. The right thing to do, the so-called ethical thing to do, is to change your behavior.
Cool.
Does he have an example where he was trying to use this, or is he just kind of curious?
Yeah, I don't know, Richard. Do you want to share an example? We'll see.
I didn't know if he's trying this and actually had this happen.
I would assume so, right? It's a pretty specific question. I rarely, you know, and that's even usually with public APIs that are free, rarely run into over hitting their numbers, right? They often have really high numbers, but there are some that are very limiting and it sucks.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I don't think I've ever gone crazy with like API calls, like maybe like, oh, check something once an hour.
Well, you know, there might have been a reason why this guy right here put in the detection of frequent requests and then an ever increasing slowdown on his website.
Yeah. So again, you know, Tank, he manages the forum, right? And then you talk about a place just asking for, it was like when I did the survey on AutoHotkey, like, you know, I was just asking for people to automate the damn survey, right? I mean, you're just really asking for trouble. So yeah, I see how the forum is just begging for bad.
I mean, you know, I would be surprised if people didn't try shit specifically on AutoHotkey.com. I mean, it would
Agree.
It would actually it would be an insult if we weren't the target of every kind of attack there is.
It's funny. Yeah. Okay, so some of my friends, yeah, this is some of my friends, not me. I'm just kidding, Richard. Want to scrape some information from an online English dictionary website. They are far more geeky than I am. Yeah, that shouldn't be. Well, and this is where it just gets a little confusing, right? And we have. Jackie and I did a webinar on APIs, which I think is one of our best webinars we did, because we talk about the differences between web scraping and API calls. Because the confusing part is, of course, a browser call or browser request to a web page is an API call. This is where it gets confusing. But you can do the browser scraping, or you could look at the browser's traffic and try to replicate that instead of actually using a real public API. And Tank, keep me honest if I'm, you know, like I said, this is all, I've just figured it out. And then there's public APIs that they will make available. Those are the ones that, generally speaking, they have very generous, you know, numbers that you can ping and go against. And the data is returned in like a JSON string, typically now at least. And they're awesome.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of becoming a de facto kind of response mechanism as a JSON response. But so yes, the public APIs is where the application owner says, hey, I know you don't want to do this through the website. Here's a way for you to get what you actually need that I'm not going to complain about. It's lower overhead for the server, and I'm not trying to control what you do with the information you've got. Here's what a lot of people probably don't realize is that when you look at any web page, it's actually a series of requests that are executed by the main page itself. So if you look at index.html, within it, there is almost certainly a request to one or more JavaScript libraries. There's a request to pull in one or more cascading style sheets. There is probably multiple requests for images or even web fonts that are part of that. And then the rendering engine, which is the browser, for Chrome, that's WebKits, Internet Explorers, Trident. Edge was a fork of Trident called Edge HTML, but was replaced, I guess, within the last year or so with Chromium's WebKit. So the rendering engine that is built into the browser of choice is then executes the rendering of the page. And as part of that, it goes through and it says, hey, there's a reference to this other content that I don't have yet. And it sends out another request for it and then applies those details to the page itself so that you get this pretty looking content that you've asked for. But it's rarely just one. And so the whole idea of using the web APIs is to figure out which one requested the actual data, which request actually had the data you wanted. And then make that just that single isolated request with no browser. Because if there's no rendering engine, it's not going to make the external requests occur. There's different, most people don't realize that there's different JavaScript engines based on the browser. Chrome uses one called V8.
I think, Tom, was I talking to you? I was talking to someone like a week ago when they were saying they had different versions of JavaScript that they were messing with. Was it? I thought it was you. Maybe not. Look in your face, I'd say no.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think we really talked about JavaScript last week.
Yep. Well, no, it wasn't during our public call. And I guess because I don't think we spoke. Whatever, it doesn't matter. The other thing, Tank, I was going to say was it's great having your perspective of, and I know you do both sides, right? But in this part, you're wearing the hat of the server side. I hadn't really thought about it because I talked a lot in that webinar we did about when we do a browser request for a given page. And like you said, often it's 5 to 15 or whatever different API calls that are pulling different types of data and all this stuff. And it's usually the files, like let's say it's at least a meg versus an API call. It's tiny, tiny files, right? I always represented it as, look how much smaller network traffic it is for us, right? What a great thing. But you made a really good point earlier too. It's, hey, the vendor actually likes it too. It's far less traffic for him as well.
It is significantly less server overhead. I was actually about to, for the sake of the whole conversation, I wanted to, and I'm doing this in a separate panel here. Since I have the power like He-Man, I can I have this ability to pull up all of the stuff that we have around AutoHotkey just for the visual. It doesn't give anything away about the details of our security model for me to share what some of this looks like, though. And I think it's beneficial for people to be able to see, because I don't. There's a lot of even within the IT world. There's a lot of really bad. I wanna use the synonym of superstitious responses. It's not that they don't know any better or that they somehow think the internet works differently than it does. It's that they imagine that there is going to be some kind of mythical level of abuse that occurs that is going to give them an unexpected result. And it's based partially on the fact that it does happen, but it's not as frequent and prolific as the superstition would be. And it's easy to deal with. It really is. It's easy to deal with when it does occur. So I really, what in the world is going on here?
Anyway, you're just talking about the basic traffic on the forum, is that right?
Well, so I was going to talk about what server traffic and what, when we talk about overhead on a server.
Yeah. Okay.
I wanted to bring up some visualizations for folks so that it's a little easy. It's a little easier when you can see the whole picture than it is to hear, these schmucks talk about it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Everyone likes pictures.
Videos, they're more visual.
Everybody likes pictures. All right. So anyway, I guess what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen here. I want to make sure my view of the forum doesn't give anything away that's inappropriate.
That's something we were talking about at the beginning of this is, always making sure you're not sharing something you don't want to.
Well, yeah. And now, fortunately or unfortunately, I have enough corporate life experience to where I rarely forget that anymore. I do sometimes make mistakes, but it's not as common.
Drill that stuff into you.
All right, so this is somebody has I've loaded the actual forum up. I'm going to hop over here to my network tab of the dev tools. Let's kill that, and just going to the board index, right? All right, and so your perception is you're loading one thing, okay, but you're in fact loading all of these things, right? There's a lot going on. And you have this waterfall view here of when the request even started, right? You see there's kind of a growth pattern here. And
I've done sorry, I was gonna say I've done stuff with IE, but I'd be looking at this and I'd see the XHR request, from one of them and go, wait a minute, I can do that one on its own entirely and have it connected to that window, IE window, and not even have to have my credentials and all that crap. And it's so awesome.
Yeah. So, and then you can see here what page initiated the request. So remember I was talking about how the rendering engine loads some content and then sees where another request is needed and then makes a new request. Well, that's what you're tracking here. Okay. So we're seeing here where other content that was loaded by index.php actually had further requests down the chain. And so it's real easy to get lost in the idea that everything has something special about it. Now, back to your point of the fetch XHR. So what this really boils down to, and it's taken different versions and iterations throughout the history of the internet. At first everybody was big on this idea of Ajax calls, and people didn't really like calling it Ajax for a while. And they wanted to make different versions of it. It didn't work the same in every browser, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It got kind of weird for a little bit. And they kind of standardized on this. Go ahead.
Ajax is asynchronous JavaScript something, right? Is that right?
Yeah, I don't even remember what it originally stood for. But the bottom line is this is where, not via the rendering agent, a request is made by code.
Oh,
Okay. So that's the distinction. A request was not made by just loading the page. It was made by code within a page. Some JavaScript or even VB script if we're doing an old Internet Explorer thing. But there was an HTTP request. Another thing here that most people don't really want to look at is this WebSocket view. You know, there's a lot of, I got into this really interesting in an Android automation forum the other day. It's really interesting argument with somebody's interpretation of how data is pushed from a server to a client, you know, for notifications and things. All HTTP requests are RESTful. That is, there is a request, a response, and a closed connection. Period. The RFC allows no connection-based scenario to exist. Okay, if you need a connection where there is open communication between a server and a client, you must use a WebSocket. Okay.
Yep.
Now, when you're looking at the all, you can kind of pick those out if you're looking at, and there isn't any on AutoHotkey, but you can pick them out because the request URL will start ws:// Those are WebSocket connection requests. It's a different protocol, communication protocol. But that's how that's done. Now, there's also the situation where an API will make repeated HTTP calls to a server and then only load it when it's different. Okay, that's different. That's not a push from a server. That is just a looped request until an update is found. Important distinction. WebSockets are not something most amateurs are going to do on their own. It's a little tricky to apply, and most people don't bother. It's not necessary, especially when you can just loop an HTTP request and wait for an update. But anyway, so that's kind of what I was getting at. And
cool.
You know, really for success, when you're looking at the list of responses, you're looking at anything that starts with a 2 or a 3. Mm-hmm. 4s and 5s always indicate a problem.
Yeah, even the 3s, depending on what you're doing, are you want to know, right? You got redirected for some reason. Yeah.
Well, or you want to know that you were loaded from cache. I think it's 302 is a cache response. No, that's a redirect. But
also, let's get back to the whole the V1 and V2 thing on the forum.
Sorry, I get distracted.
All right, yeah. I mean, this is good. Even I learned some stuff here. I didn't know there was that WS tab there, so that was good to see that there.
Oh, I was going to talk about server overhead. So between the server and between you and the server we have this Cloudflare web firewall, okay, that analyzes your requests and does things with it. But as an admin, I can come in here and I can look and see. Now I picked the wrong one. I can come in and see you know, number of requests. I can see where in the world the requests are coming from. It's a heat map. Now, if I pull this up frequently, I kind of start to see a trend. And if one day I come in here and we're having trouble with the server and all of a sudden Malaysia is real dark, what do I think's going on?
Some sort of an attack.
Right. You can see I get reports about things that Cloudflare just blocks.
Well, and you helped me also on the Automator. I was getting attacked by some things, and we walked through how to spot some of these and to block them by IP address at least.
Now,
anyway.
Also, so after the Cloudflare and before the server itself, there is a network based firewall at our hosting company. And so I have firewalls around each of the servers. We have a database and an application server, as many configurations do. But once it gets to the server, this is where we really are talking about our server overhead and the bandwidth that is used for requests. And I can see now, I know that the private outbound are the direct connections to our database server, right? Public outbound. So there are some API calls within our server I know that do things like there's some analytics done around you as a visitor's IP address.
Sure.
For a code-based security implementation that I have. I can see what my CPU usage is like. I like seeing it down here under 30. That makes me happy. Disk IO, that's just how much disk activity reading and writing. So this when I talk about overhead, this is specifically after it's been through all of that filtering, what's actually happening on my server so that I can determine the health of, do I need to add more hardware? Do I need to look at new potential abuse vectors, things like that. So that's what we're talking about with overhead. And when people make API requests, since there are fewer requests, this necessarily is lower overhead.
Well, and to get back to, I don't have it in front of me, who had asked the question, but this is your point is, you're going to see that traffic no matter how you disguise it, right?
Right.
And be able
no matter how it's disguised, I'm still going to see it. It's still there, and I'm still tracking you by IP address.
Yeah, so it really comes down to websites
and by browser.
Yes, the user agent. Yeah.
So
cool.
Anyway.
Sorry. So back to the V1, V2.
Yep. Sorry.
That's all right. Yeah, it was interesting stuff. So we know V2 is not back. It's going to break a lot of things, right? A lot of changes.
Yep.
Similar to, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, right? It's different. Similar to how vanilla and V1 or L, whatever you want to call it, had a lot of changes.
1.0 and 1.1.
Yeah. So currently, and I don't remember if you actually said did you make a decision? Or is there a debate, discussion about what to do?
There is, and it's reoccurred over the years. All right, so the whole version 2 syntax breaking thing, this has been a conversation that's been going on at least since about 2008, before there was a version 2. Wow. I want to make sure we understand that this is a really old argument.
Wow.
It's been going on a very long time. There are some really deep-seated opinions on the subject that I still don't understand all of. So the last discussion on the staff forum ended in the agreement to add a subforum under Ask for Help and scripts and functions and tutorials. I don't know why they decided version 2 development deserved a whole separate forum, but scripts and functions and Ask for Help didn't. I argue very strongly that this needs to be like a decision point before you can even read or view content. Because they're so different. They're so different. And I always harp on the subject of AutoHotkey's target audience was never programmers. It was people who do not know how to, nor necessarily want to learn how to program. Okay.
Yeah.
And this whole fight and push for objects, you know, there are things where objects make more sense and stuff, but it should not be a push to get everybody to use object-oriented programming. It's not a concept that's easy for the uninitiated to digest. It really isn't. And as a self-taught programmer, I remember my own journey through this, and it wasn't easy then, and it's it was only when I took an actual C++ class and had a really good professor explain how compilers allocate memory that I understood any of the argument for objects versus anything. But that is so far low level that it makes no sense to force the subject to those who are uninitiated.
No, I think you're right. I mean, I definitely, in the sense of I guess it gets back to discussing the purpose of AutoHotkey versus the people that come into AutoHotkey, right? And I think there's debate there we could say about that. But the vast majority of people that come in, they're like me. They're not programmers and don't want to be a programmer. And I want something simple I can pick up and start using. And it's amazing that AutoHotkey, I can do a lot more advanced stuff, but I don't have to start off with that.
Right. You don't have to. You can choose to grow into the more advanced stuff. Like I can automate a browser without ever doing anything with COM.
Right.
But yeah. I won't want to after I have.
Yeah.
That's so true. That's so well put.
That's okay.
I did a video actually where I was kind of talking a lot about this stuff where I did like a bunch of Chrome automation ones, and I started with like comms, you know, talking about how you can't do that there. So here's some fancy ways you can do it. But I did one video where I was talking about doing send commands. And I was like right away in the video, I was like, this is not the way you want to do it, but if it's your only option, I'll show you how to do it, which is send commands. And it's terrible, but that's how I came into AutoHotkeys, was literally just send commands for you know, different things. And you know, like you were saying, I moved into, you know, learning what comms were, all that kind of stuff, and it's just like I was blown away.
I mean,
I did another video where I kind of asked people's opinion, V1 versus V2, and I mean, people had strong opinions, and it came down to it. The people who were obviously coders, yeah, they were like, oh, version 2, everybody should convert. It's way better. But then I had the people who were like new, and they're like, you know, I'm just going to stick with V1.
Well, so here's the thing, okay, and this is easy to forget because this goes back to what Joe was alluding to at the beginning of the conversation about how I ended up in this position with AutoHotkey that I'm in, and it started with Chris Millette deciding, you know, hey, I'm done, okay, it's time for me to step away and hand it off, right? And he picked who he thought was the best person for the job at the time. And you know, it's easy in hindsight to forget that at the time, there wasn't a lot of debate on that Titan, aka Poly, was the best choice. But he went apeshit quick. I mean, it happened quick. It really, really happened quick. And so there was some argument, and I'm of a believer that you know, the reason capitalism works is because people can vote with their feet. So I just staged a parallel forum, and I mean, it wasn't a week before all of the admins had signed up. I didn't even announce it. I never told anyone. They were so unhappy with what this psychopath had done that they just were looking for anything else, and it just happened. And finally, one day he pings me out of the blue and he says, "Hey, do you want the domain?" I had asked for it a few times.
But I don't know if, Tom, are you aware of what he's even referring to with the forums?
I've heard some stuff, yeah, before, but I never knew like deep down what was going on. I kind of
it was about 2012, and I staged this new forum in 2013 in October. By 2015, Poly had agreed to surrender ownership of the domain and any remaining material, because at the end of the day, if we're not serving that target audience, and I had a conversation with Chris behind the scenes about all of this, and there were a couple of commitments that I made to Chris as part of this. Number one, AutoHotkey.com will remain ad-free, period. It's not up for debate. There will never be a paywall of any kind for any reason, for any product at AutoHotkey.com. If somebody wants to do something like that, then start a new domain, even if it's me, and do it there. And that our target audience, Chris and I discussed this, the target audience was non-programmers. Okay. And so every time I get into a conversation with the staff or anybody else, it is from the perspective not of me, someone who is well-versed both at a low level and a high level about programming languages and APIs. It's not my perspective. It is the perspective that Chris and I agreed on when I started this. And that is, our target audience is people who don't know any better. Okay? They don't need to know any better. They don't want to know any better. And that's okay. Give them the simplest version of what they need. And if they want to dive deeper, then it's an option. But we're not pushing them there. There's no push. So this doesn't really work for me, because as a person who doesn't think in terms of hierarchies, as a new person, if I see ask for help, I stop looking. I'm not reading further. Are you going to read further? If you find what you think you're looking for? Do you typically find your keys and then look for other things that you don't need to go to the grocery store? No, you don't. You stop there, and so that's the way most people's brains work. So I suggested, hey, if it's time, because Lexicos is finally committed to a syntax. Okay. And there's a beta. Okay. We haven't had a beta yet. We've had an alpha, but not a beta. And so it's time. It's time to really give people the choice. And really, if we're going to have an ask for help, we need to specify. This is my argument because of my viewpoint. It needs to be part of me clicking this, right? I need something that forces the choice. I need this to either prefix with version 1 or version 2, or I need this to be what's called a forum category, where when I click it, I don't get a list of topics. What I get is a choice between version 1 and version 2 that I have to choose before I can read or post content.
Conversation kind of makes me think of, other things too, not just like the forums, but, how that's going to play out on, Joe's a moderator on the Facebook. How's Reddit going to play out? Are they going to make a second subreddit? We're already
right.
a gaming Reddit for.
So that's the other
yet with.
that's the other side of it. Okay. Because if there's no delineation, there are these links to our forum from all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
To forum topics and stuff. And if there's no delineation in the topic, when people read it, they have no idea either.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if this breadcrumb up here, when I'm on ask for help and looking at, you know, whatever this, if it doesn't say version 2 up here somewhere, how do I know? How do I know? What am I reading? I don't know. I got this link from Reddit. You know, so
yeah, it'd be nice if like the URL somehow did tell you.
Yeah, so I've had some really strong words, but at the end of the day, I rarely overrule, if you will, the staff on anything, except for when it comes to measures on security, or in the case of you know, the forum member that I made an executive decision based on personality clash to just ban. You know, it's rare that I just make a so-called executive decision, but I do it from time to time, and this is just not one that I've been forced to do it yet. But all I can do is think about the whole Python situation, right? This is not new. This is not a new paradigm in forums, that code forums where you have major version differences and we don't handle it properly in this for discussion groups. And it's not even new for us. And it's like we haven't learned anything.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, as I mentioned to you, Tank, before, when I first started, either the first 2 to 3 years, I used hot strings and hotkeys without a hotkey, and I was the cat's meow at work, right? I was so much more efficient. And then I changed jobs and I started learning dot notation and COM, and that was when I'd go to the forum, and I saw a lot of posts from you because you had that like syntax kind of, not writer but tool, like an IWB2 learner tool, but for the older version, right? For with IE, and writing the syntax for COM with the vanilla version of AutoHotkey, which didn't have COM built into it. And right. And then there was a newer one, and it was like, holy, why are one of these so much easier to read than the other one? And it took me quite a while to figure out what's going on. And even then, there was no way to filter and just say, only show me these. It was really annoying. So the fact we're kind of jumping back into this now, Albert wrote in the chat here, he was asking, what's a good place to start learning about COM? And what I just replied back there, I'm waiting for a response, but it's such an enormous topic, right? Chances are you probably, if it was me starting over, as I say, I started learning web scraping even before dot notation, and it was really painful. What I would say is don't start with web at all. Learn either Excel maybe, or Word, or even PowerPoint using COM, because if Tom has Excel and Tank has Excel and I have Excel, it's all the same damn, almost exactly the same. It's going to run on everyone. On websites, they're all different, and it makes it so much more complicated to learn. So picking.
So I think this is a good opportunity for me to help people understand COM in a way that seems to be so mystified. So I'm going to pull the veil back.
Cool.
Okay, I'm gonna lift the veil. So angels are gonna sing. The sun is gonna shine. Virgins will be lined up outside. Okay, so back in the day, Microsoft was faced with this problem: how do you get applications to talk to each other? And in a way that's safe, and they did this thing with something called DDE. It's still around, and it still works, but there were some real problems, some real security issues with it. And it doesn't matter what those were. but there were. And it wasn't very standardized. And so the idea was really, how do I make a steering wheel for a car? When in terms of ways for applications to talk to each other, how do I do the equivalent of a steering wheel for a car? Okay. If I sit in a car seat and there's a steering wheel in front of me, I immediately know what it does, and it works the same on every car. Okay. So what COM did, it was a solution for a language agnostic, meaning it has nothing to do with the programming language you're using. Okay, it's the same for VB, for .NET, for AutoHotkey, for Python, it doesn't matter. Okay, how do I make a communication method available for an application that is safe to use and standardized regardless of the language? Okay, so and just to reiterate and reinforce this point, COM has nothing to do with AutoHotkey. We are implementing a COM interface for an application with AutoHotkey, the same way we would with VB, the same way we would with Python or any other language you can imagine. And that's really important that people understand that that's a distinction. The other thing that is important to understand is that it starts with the idea that you acquire an object, and that object has methods and properties available to it, functions and variables for the less programmers. Okay, just functions and variables that are attached to this thing. So if I get an Internet Explorer object, that Internet Explorer object automatically comes with its own, regardless of language, functions and variables that are attached to it. So the Internet Explorer object has a navigate method, a function, right? And it is called exactly the same way in every language. You call navigate object, then navigate, and with parameters like a URL and possibly extra post data or whatever. But navigate always has the same parameters and is used exactly the same way in every language. Okay. Excel is another object. So if I want to know something about COM, I need only learn how COM objects are instantiated in my language. And then I want to look up that object on the internet and find their methods and variables, their properties and functions, etc.
Okay, let me interrupt you this for a second. If I'm understanding you correctly as well, because I hadn't really thought this through. Let's say I go to Stack Overflow and site for AutoHotkey, well, just site in general has a COM object.
Right.
But the example listed is someone using JavaScript to connect to it.
Yeah.
And what you were saying is I could still study that perfectly fine and look at the parameters and what they're taking, because it as far as the COM object's concerned, it's kind of like the DLL call. I'm just shoving stuff into it, but it's going to be the same structure. Is that right?
Right.
99% right.
So AutoHotkey supports a dotted syntax. PHP supports a hyphen arrow syntax for object notation, for the object oriented programming. But the bottom line is the only real difference here is how do I instantiate that object? Okay, is it VB's create object? Is it a .NET new something? Right. Is it, which is what AutoHotkey does as well, is a new, I'm sorry, it doesn't do it. It does a create, COM create object with it. And here's the other kicker. These objects are identified universally the same way. So Internet Explorer dot application, whatever, I don't remember.
Exactly.
Is exactly the same on everybody's machine, because this is how these objects are registered. COM objects are registered on your machine when they're installed. They're all there. And in fact, I'm going to share my screen again because I'm going to blow your mind. I'm going to part the heavens and blow your mind one more time.
Well, this is one because I've run into, and probably a lot of people, that watch this have run into also. They'll try to do something and they'll say unregistered object and that you need to register it, right? And that's where you're saying is like, every once in a while you do.
Well, not everything can be registered. It has to become enabled in the application itself. But whatever is registered, anybody can find. You can make a list of it quickly.
Oh yeah,
and easily.
I have that script. Yeah.
Well, right, but most people don't realize the guts of how stupidly simple this is in that script. So let's open up my Visual Studio Code.
Kind of going back to what Joe was saying with, where you should start learning is, like Excel and stuff.
Well, there's the problem is that there's this magic. All right. And you have to pull the magic away.
Well,
for people to really get it. Every epiphany I've ever had teaching myself anything in code happened as the moment I understood at a very low level what was really happening.
Yeah, I would just say, Tank, at the beginning, I'm fine with letting it be magic and just plugging in some stuff. But I totally understand your point of when you really want to be able to write your own stuff and really get into it, you got to understand what's going on in the background, right? To really get it. But to just maybe step into it, most people, they just need to understand how to create the object and call the function.
All right. So at the very core of this, if we create an object, this Win Management's all by itself, okay? This creates our ability to use Microsoft's WMI to write SQL-based queries for our system.
Yeah, it's very powerful. Yeah.
Right. I have a great so this is just a common database language. You can learn it anywhere. It's all over the internet. And then I query this object, this table, this whatever you want to call it, Win32 classic COM class setting. Okay. Every COM object you have on your system is registered and available here. Every single one of them. And the prog ID is things like excel.application, Internet Explorer.application, whatever it may be. These are the words. There's another one that this particular setup isn't used to query against, but it's the where is it? Component ID, which is that long GUI ID.
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
Okay. So everything that is registered doesn't have a program ID. That's important to understand, but everything has a component ID. And that has to do with the fact that they're listed in your Windows registry. Okay, that's how they're listed. But they have some standard properties, and when I build my own private things, this right here, this Win32 classic COM class setting is actually the same term that Microsoft uses. So I can copy this, and if I want to know more about it, and sorry, I can't find copy all of a sudden, and I can hop over here to the internet. I can paste that in and search it, right? And lo and behold, I'm in Microsoft's documentation for what this object is, and I can see all of the properties that are available to it, right? People want to rename things and make them, easier to read, but I prefer naming things in ways that I can relate it directly to the source's documentation. The bottom line here is I can search my whole system for anything and find a COM object that's related to it. Like, let's say I want to know something about objects that are related to Excel on my system. So, right, there's not just Excel.application. There's actually other sub objects, right?
That are completely independent?
That you could access independently.
Now, I've done a little bit of VBA stuff. Does that have to do, like when you're in Excel and VBA and you have these different libraries that you can turn on and off? Is that or that's something else entirely?
No.
Okay.
No. So these are COM objects registered on your system.
Cool.
And so these are all served by the application itself and accessible. And the bottom line here is that there's more to know than basics. But all I have to do is I have to know how to instantiate within the language of choice, whatever this object is, right? So if I did for the sake of those playing along at home, I'll just
one thing I was going to say about Internet Explorer too is, I don't know if he's using this for work, but I definitely would stay away from comms if you're going to be only solely using it for Internet Explorer. Most companies are removing it from their systems. So that's something to watch out, even if your company hasn't announced it. I guarantee they will very soon remove it.
Okay. Most COM objects, in fact, do not spawn a window attached with their application. So we have to make sure that the window is visible. But this visible property is, if I look up this program ID, right?
Yeah, Albert chimed in. It's funny because I was just writing about it on my live channel here, but I have an Excel function library that has, I'd say at least probably 40, maybe more functions with how to connect Excel and then do some of the very core stuff, and it's super helpful.
Right. So I can see here that this method is exactly what's listed in Microsoft's object documentation, right? I didn't pull this visible out of a hat.
Sure. Right.
So all I did was set it to true to make it on. And if I ran, just this, it will open up an Excel window. Purdue. And so the only thing that I needed to know outside of Microsoft's documentation of the Excel.application was how within my language to instantiate.
And to be more specific, just for people that aren't used to this tank, that COM object create, COM OBJ create that you have in front of you. That's where, when you see them in the forum, you'll see slightly different, wording around that, but often they're very similar.
Yeah, because the syntax changed a bit as we went through this. And if you were in VB, it would be create object. If you were in JavaScript, it would be new active X object, right? Or whatever it is. I don't remember.
But to continue on, because I didn't realize, I didn't think about it. To the right of that, in between the double quotes, that is what will be the same for every program. That's what you're saying, right?
The double quotes?
Well, yeah, the Excel dot application. That is what is
right. This is the program ID that is registered on my system.
So
now that is standard because when Excel is installed, that is the program ID that Microsoft has chosen to register in your registry.
Right. So here's a tip. If you are searching, what I typically do is I search the forum and Stack Overflow, first for my support. However, you might not want to include the com object create in your query, right? So just search for the string he has there with
right.
If you first don't find it with AutoHotkey, allow it to expand it to search with anything. And that's the other really great thing is when you start looking at I'll use Excel to create my VBA macro, and then I'll look at the code, and it's so easy to adapt to AutoHotkey code because the code is really similar.
And would you be able to send me this through email just so I can link it in the description?
You bet.
Just because, I like to put the code in there that we talk about.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Makes it a little easier. We were talking about the whole, people don't want pictures of code. So,
right. Yeah, that's funny. Right. Yeah, we're getting up there in the time. Did anyone else have any other questions? Did you have any questions in your channel, Tom?
No, just people saying hi. Just watching.
Did your wife chime in?
No, she's not here.
Slacker. His wife is a JavaScript programmer. I forget.
Mostly JavaScript, TypeScript.
JavaScript. Okay. Yep.
Software developer. Yeah.
Don't you mix Java and JavaScript?
They're the same, right? That's awesome.
What a regrettable thing. I mean, I would rather people just called it ECMA 6 for the web, because that's what it is, instead of JavaScript.
That's funny.
Anyway, just real quick here on the screen here, I did load. If I search this program ID, I come up with, here's that UID I mentioned, because that's how it's registered in the system. Right. And
now,
we have some other information here about it. We could have searched the registry for it as well, is my point.
Right. And I was going to clarify something you mentioned earlier too. Every COM object, let's say COM object for lack of a better thing, the things referred to are going to have that Excel.application. However, not everything has this CLS ID. Is that right? You mentioned
okay.
Not everything has some sort of
everything is going to have a class ID, a GUI ID. That long series of numbers and characters that's up there in the address bar.
Yep.
But not everything is going to have a program ID.
Oh, thank you. That's what I was.
There are things that are intentionally hidden.
Actually, hold on. Help pretty easy. I'm reading a comment from Albert. It can help pretty easy. It would be awesome if you could show sometime, guys, some examples of Google Calendar API. Yeah. I've played with it. Basically, I have some code on it. I think I have a video on it somewhere.
Yeah, you have a video I watched recently.
Okay. So, Tank or Tom, either go. I had a couple conversations with Azaleas/RapRex about 4 months ago, and we were talking through. To me, this was really interesting. It really helped me click, like you said, Tank, when the bells start going off. He's like, hey, every DLL call. I'm sorry, for thing, there'll be a DLL call. COM object. If you have a COM object, there's an associated DLL call that it's working with. It's kind of built around, is that right? You're connecting to it. Now that's not the reverse. For every DLL call, they don't necessarily have a COM object that we can, because it's kind of like the translator thing that you were saying. It allows us to connect to it regardless of our language.
Right. The application or DLL has to have an associated setting enabled within it at a code level for it to register. Okay.
And then I think he also said, often there's much more functionality in the actual DLL than there is in the COM object. So if you're trying to do stuff and you can't actually do it with the COM object, you might be able to connect to the DLL and do what you want. It's just going to be a little more complicated.
That may be true. However, I would say it is also significantly more risky in terms of system crashes and triggering antivirus blocking.
Ah, interesting. Cool.
I mentioned that in one of my videos, actually. So.
DLL injection is something that it's actually one of the main reasons AutoHotkey keeps triggering antiviruses.
Interesting.
So DLL injection, it has a lot of value, but if it's not wrapped a certain way and done a certain way, it just triggers antiviruses. So anyway, the bottom line here is that all of this stuff is in your registry too. I mean, this isn't magic. It's not pulling this stuff out of thin air. You have to understand where and how to look, and you'll find it. And understanding that these are really, it's just a communicate. COM is a communication protocol. That's what it is. It's like HTTP.
Yeah, we were equating it to like an interpreter, which allowed you to easily connect to it. And it's talking to something else, but on its own, it's not doing anything itself, right? It's
right. It's not an interpreter.
No,
right.
Yeah, I meant like a translation type interpreter. You know what I mean? It's a stepping stone that gets you into something else, but allows you to do things much simpler than, like, to me, I can play with the COM objects. Back to your point earlier, like you need to know all the stuff. Hey, all that stuff's good. Don't get me wrong, but I could start. Anybody can look at like my Excel function library, and if they understand functions, they could be using it so quickly versus trying to do that with DLL calls or something. Whew, it's a much steeper learning curve.
Let me change the metaphor here for you. Okay, so if a program DLL whatever is a house, a building, a business, whatever, right? Something with 4 walls that everyone recognizes. COM is like opening the front door and telling someone inside what you want. A DLL call is like going in there and doing it.
I love it. That's awesome.
Okay, that's really kind of the only difference.
I love it. That's a really good analogy. It's a very strong visual of
That's how I've explained comms, actually, is using like a house and a door, but I never thought to add in the DLL part to that, kind of analogy. So I like that. Yeah, I've literally used the house example before for comms, and
it's the same way I explain database indexing. Okay, if you have a database that you want to search and there's no indexes, it's equivalent to going into a neighborhood and knocking on every door and saying, "Does Sue live here?" Right. But if there are indexes, then you go to Sue's house and ask for Sue.
And back on staying on that same analogy, if you've indexed the address, but you're looking for Sue, that doesn't do shit, right? Like you have to have indexed off of the name for it to actually make a difference, right? Index is great, but it's got to be off the thing you're using. Yeah.
Yep. Cool. Yeah.
I think we're running out of time here if we want to start wrapping up a little bit.
Well, thank you, Tate, for jumping on.
It was great to talk to you.
Some very interesting stuff.
You name everywhere, so it's good to actually see you.
Actually, this whole thing kind of spawned an idea for me. I think I may see if there's any interest for live sessions for people, and maybe I'll log into the IRC or Discord and list it there, say, hey, I'm online if somebody wants help with something.
Yeah.
And do live video with them. Because you have to demystify things before people are really going to understand what you say, what you're talking about. Because now when I talk about a COM object with you guys, you're going to have a totally different perspective about what I'm saying now that you understand what I understand.
Sure. Yeah, and that's the big difference I always tell people is when you can actually come to you, hey, I'm trying to work on this, and you can help me look at my code, this, it's so much easier for me to get, right? Versus picking an abstract example and trying to work through it. If I'm not familiar with it, it's much harder to understand. So being able to show up with a given example you're trying to work on, it's night and day. And getting someone where you can do Q&A. This is what someone asked me if they could have a call last week. And I'm like, all right, I can jump on for a few minutes. And in minutes, in a couple of minutes, I helped him that would have taken him hours, just because I'm familiar with AutoHotkey, right? And it's like, having someone you can just ask some questions to interactively is so different than,
oh yeah.
And even just on the forum, it's so hard to get specific, because I can interrupt you. Wait. What do you mean that thing you just said, right? Like it's so much better.
Yeah, and on the forum, you like got to go back and select the right thing and quote it and hope the person. There's just so much that's lost in text-based communication that I hate it.
Well, the other thing, which I'll go ahead and throw out here, is I had talked to Tank some about it, and I don't know if Tom's interested. Actually, I keep forgetting, Tom, that you don't work all the time now, for at least for a company. But I was talking to Tank about having like some training, kind of like a boot camp, an intro, or something, and teaching people AutoHotkey. And we could have an actual training, with a clear outline of what's going to get covered. And if people are interested in that, please chime in, onto this thread, or send me an email. I think everyone's got my email address somewhere, joe@the-Automator.com. And let me know if you'd be interested in that. And then we can, if so, then we can actually start working on something. But yeah, I think that'd be pretty awesome.
Yeah, I got a community tab now too, just to throw it out there. So, people, I'm not really sure if everybody gets notifications for that, but check that out. I'll throw that as a question in there for a poll, to get my side of what people would be interested. So I'll throw that in here probably in the next hour or two for y'all.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. And like I said, if you're interested too, Tom, I'm happy to. I was reaching out to Tank because I was like, hey, I was planning to have it like 4 days. And I thought, I could lead some of it, but I don't want to do all of this, and even then there's stuff I'm just not qualified to do. If I could bring people in to teach pieces, then it's far less work on me. So that's why I was thinking, is like, what, and I can work more on the whole marketing of it and getting people in and kind of getting going. But
that's a great idea. For sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. And thanks for being here. Tank, thanks for joining us. And thank you, Albert. And I'm sorry, I don't know why I can't scroll up. Oh, there we go. But I still can't see the first person that had a question. I can't scroll that high. So sorry. Weird. I forget his name. I see a Chris and Albert, but I know there was, is it Richard? Sorry, Richard. I see it now. So anyway, thank you all. Tom, I don't know if you want to commit, we'll talk about it, but maybe next week. What do you think?
Yeah.
Okay. That should work for me.
Same time, same place.
Same bat channel.
Yep.
All right, everyone. Thank you. Have a good night or day.
Bye.
Cool. Well, that went well.